what do we do in response to the alleged contradictions that are found in the Bible? I would imagine that many of you, as you speak to family and friends, have heard the objection that the Bible has so many contradictions in it. Maybe that's been something in your personal faith journey that you've struggled with, wrestled with, doubted. How can I trust the Bible if the Bible contradicts itself? And quite frankly, this is something that Christian apologists do in response to the Quran. We'll look at the Quran and say, it says two different things. How can you trust this holy text that you say you believe with your whole heart? I know that there are a lot of lists out there on the internet. You can find the blog posts. If you put it into AI, I'm sure AI will give you plenty of alleged contradictions in the Bible. And what I'd like to do today is address one of them that we talked about in last week's passage and show how the contradiction can be easily reconciled, how there is a difference in emphasis between the two writers. This is a relatively easy one to respond to. I'm sure that there are others that you could find out there that are much more delicate and tricky than this one. But since it came up in last week's passage, I'd like to take a moment to address it. So it's about how Judas died and some of the details surrounding his death. It's raised in Matthew chapter 27, verses 3 through 10, and there are three specific points that I'd like to draw your attention to. One is that Judas returned the silver to the chief priests. Two is that Judas hanged himself. And three is that the chief priests used the money to buy the potter's field, which is also called the field of blood. Then Luke, writing in Acts chapter 1, says that it was Judas who bought the field. It says that Judas fell headlong and his intestines were spilled out. And it says that everyone who heard about this called it Akaldama, or field of blood. So there's three specific questions between these two passages. One, whose money was used to purchase the field? Two, how did Judas die? And three, why was it called the field of blood? First, whose money was used? Was it Judas's money, or was it the chief priests who used the money to purchase the field? I believe this one is very easily reconciled because the chief priests used Judas' money to purchase the field. The chief priests did not consider the money to be theirs. In fact, they tried to reject it when Judas brought it back to them, and Judas just flung it into the temple because he didn't want it anymore, but the chief priests couldn't accept it back either. So the chief priests made that purchase on his behalf. Think about having work contracted to be done on your home. Is it you who are purchasing the materials? Yes, but it's actually the contractor who's using your money based on the contract that you agreed to purchase the materials on your behalf. So whose money is it? Is it the contractor's money? Is it your money? Well, it's both. It's your money that the contractor is using to make the purchase. And I believe that's what's happening here. The second question is, how did Judas actually die? Did Judas hang himself? Well, Matthew is very clear that yes, he hung himself. What Luke adds is that he fell headlong. And so many people will reconcile these two statements by saying that Judas hung himself and then either the tree branch broke or something happened with how Judas hung himself that snapped. His body fell headlong and his intestines were spilled out. And then finally, why is it called the field of blood? Because Matthew said it's because the blood money was used to purchase the field. Luke insinuates that it's called the field of blood because it's where Judas' blood was shed. So which one is it? I believe it's both. That as the culture developed its reference to this particular plot of land, some people referred to it as Akaldama because of the blood money. Some people referred to it as Akaldama because of the blood of Judas that was shed there. And both are true simultaneously. What's important is that these two accounts, Matthew's account and Luke's account, both refer to it by the same name. So there's a consistency. Why it was called that way, I believe likely has two meanings that are both equally true in the Jerusalem culture in the decades following Judas' passing. Here's the point, and here's why I raised this. In Acts 1:16, we read that the Holy Spirit spoke long ago through David, and Peter is quoting some Psalms. Many are going to attack the alleged contradictions of the Bible to make God out to be a liar. Because if God says one thing in one place and he says something opposite or different in another place, both things can't be simultaneously true, so God is lying in one of those places. What we believe is that God inspired the Bible through the Holy Spirit, not overriding but utilizing the pen and personality of the men who wrote those scriptures. And so the men who wrote those scriptures had a specific purpose in including the details that they included. What one person labels as a contradiction, we can say is a difference for a particular emphasis. And I understand that there are probably some contradictions that you may really struggle with that I'm not addressing in this video and probably am not going to address in a follow-up video. So I'd like to close with this theme in Acts. With all of the differences and all of the alleged contradictions of the Bible, here's what I would say in response if I was having a conversation with somebody about them. I'd say, you know what, that's a really interesting one. I don't know the answer for you. I'd be happy to look into it and see if there's some reasonable explanation about why these contradictions are very different in two different places of the Bible's account. But here's what I want to really emphasize. There is one thing that the Bible has unanimous agreement upon. All of the gospel accounts, including the account of Acts, including the letters of the New Testament, are all in unanimous agreement about the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, who is now both Lord and Christ, both Lord and Messiah. And if Jesus is alive, and he is my living hope, he is your living hope, and he's worthy of our trust. Drive it back to the resurrection, because that is the center point, the foundation, the cornerstone of our faith.